This FedGov Today program is sponsored by the National Contract Management Association. On this edition of FedGov Today with Francis Rose, the talent challenge ahead for the defense contracting community. Better contracting for better outcomes and next generation acquisition for next gen tech. Welcome to FedGov Today with Francis Rose. More than 35,000 professionals inside the Defense Department make up the pricing and contracting workforce. The composition of that workforce and the skills they need to do the job are changing as technology and other factors change. John Tenaglia is Principal Director for Defense Pricing and Contracting at DoD. At the National Contract Management Association's World Congress recently, he tells me he looks at talent building in two different ways.
One is, what capabilities are we trying to acquire? Warfighting or other capabilities the department needs to support the nation. But this group here is learning about how they do that, the process of contracting, the opportunity here to interact with people that are selling to the government. And so the role that we have as DoD contracting professionals, of course, in the buying role, and different but related, and we have to work together with one another. And so understanding how we can do that more quickly to deliver capability to our warfighters and other requirement owners, that's a big part of it. Accessing all the available technology that we need in the marketplace, commercial solutions out there that can meet warfighting needs. So really it's about how you can effectively and efficiently acquire those capabilities.
Everybody talks about speed, especially in the Department of Defense regarding acquisition. How much of that challenge and getting after that challenge is workforce skills and what you can do with your contracting professionals, and how much of it is the actual process that exists and how you can rethink that, reimagine that process?
It's a lot of it is process. I'm going to be on a panel later today with my colleagues from the Federal Acquisition Regulation Council. That's all about process and how do we apply the rule set that is, but the people ultimately are the ones that execute that. And so it's our responsibility as policymakers to give them policies that can enable them to clearly get through that process. It's complex. It's burdensome on both industry and the government for a reason, because we spend a lot of money. And the expectation is we're going to spend that funding responsibly. And so our people really are counting on us to develop the policies that will support their timely execution of these requirements.
What do you think the biggest changes have been over the last several years, maybe 5 to 10 years, that have accelerated the way that the department can acquire the things that it wants and needs?
Certainly, there's a lot of discussion here about AI and how you apply all these new technologies to get after capability faster. That is probably what our people are here to learn about. How can they incorporate that into their business processes, their business practices? How can they do that ethically and responsibly, recognizing that the information that flows through that type of mechanism comes from somewhere? How do we trust that? And so there's a lot of focus on that part of our business right now.
Is there a fear that a technology like artificial intelligence might concentrate people's attention on the technology itself, and rather than what it can actually do to facilitate, in this case, the acquisition process?
I think so. I think regardless of when you break down our acquisition process or our procurement process, I look at it from the FAR parts, for example. We have pre-award activities that involve how do we fairly select companies to perform our work. That can use some of these tools to allow us to more efficiently make those award decisions. I think any part of our process can be enhanced, improved through some of these technologies.
What is the role of a policymaker in when a new technology comes along? AI is the current example, but it's not the only one that we've talked about over time. What's the role of that policymaker to help deliver the capability as quickly as possible while still putting those guardrails around it to make sure that people don't just go crazy?
Right. So most of what we do is governed by policy and regulation. A lot of that policy and regulation is handed down through the statutes that are enacted each year, the National Defense Authorization Act. But in part, we have the opportunity to, on our own initiative, through organizations like CDAO and DIU in the Department of Defense that are really on the leading edge of understanding how we can apply some of these practices And so look, as policymakers looking to see who's setting that path, who's charting that course, helping them, piloting some of these concepts. We have a number of pilot authorities that we're trying to attempt. That's a good practice in that before you go wide scale, you demonstrate that these policies and practices are actually effective at achieving the desired outcome you're looking for. And so looking for the people that can help us pilot those is really what our policymakers are looking to do.
CDAO and DIU have both been pretty proud and pretty vocal about some of the things that they've done. Do you see a lot of the things that they've done over time scaling throughout the entire department? Has that started to happen yet in your view?
Yes, I think so. The military departments each have their own respective organizations that are like that are using the positive authorities the Congress has entrusted us with, whether it's other transaction agreements, commercial solutions opening, or the other techniques that we have. And so within each of the military departments, there are organizations that are leading this as well.
What's the best way to measure success of an effort like that when someone undertakes some kind of innovation in the contracting space? Is it just speed, or are there other measures of effectiveness that are useful for people to pay attention to?
I mean, it really all does come down to capability. When you're talking about warfighting capability, we spend most of our dollars on major weapons system acquisition. And so those programs are few and far between. So we have limited opportunities to incorporate these concepts into those programs. But really, that's what we're focusing on, is delivering capability, and the effectiveness. Our measure of merit is whether we're delivering that capability.
John, what do you think the current state of the acquisition workforce is in the Pentagon? I know they work very hard. They're very diligent about the work that they're doing. As far as the skills that they have or that you would like them to have, as far as the workload and all of that, what's your assessment of where the workforce is today?
My assessment is our workforce is very strong and is ready to meet the challenges that our department has for us, particularly the contracting workforce. And I say that with confidence because the leaders that lead organizations across the department, Army, Navy, Air Force, and all the defense agencies have strong contracting leaders that are working with us to identify how we can have that workforce that's ready and able to meet those challenges. We have a philosophy of continuous learning that we're emphasizing. This event here is a good example of that. Charging leaders and managers of all levels to have those conversations with their people about what is it they need to learn to grow. We have, in collaboration with our Defense Acquisition University, deployed 20 or more credentials, and credentials are learning packages to encourage people to continue to grow throughout their career after they've attained an initial certification that demonstrates that they have the basic skills to support the mission. How can, over the course of your career, you access all those learning assets that we're developing with the DAU to make sure people are ready to go at all times?
You made a distinction earlier in the conversation that is reflected in your title as Principal Director of Defense Pricing and Contracting. That distinction between pricing and contracting is really important for the department, isn't it?
Pricing is at the heart of what contracting professionals do. You have to balance what it is you're acquiring with the amount that you're going to pay. And that gets to maximizing the capability we can deliver to our warfighters. If we're able to do that affordably, we can afford more capability. And so price is always going to be an important part of that.
You can read more about the DoD's acquisition workforce on today's show page at fedgovtoday.com. Up next, better contracting for better outcomes. FedGov Today with Francis Rose continues in a moment. Here's Bill Lemons of Fortinet Federal on innovation in government from TechNet Cyber, presented by Carahsoft.
I never saw, when the guidance originally came out, the idea that Zero Trust was going to be a product. I knew it was an approach. It was changing the mindset of how to deploy systems and how to ensure that visibility that could be gained could be leveraged to provide appropriate access levels to data, and that landscape is going to continue to change over time. So hopefully those opportunities to gather that additional feedback from the environment, go against those checklists, identify those gaps and look for complementary systems and platforms that can help fill those gaps.
For more, go to innovationingov.com. Welcome back. Much of the discussion in the contracting and acquisition community in the federal government revolves around new technologies or new ways to help the workforce maximize its impact. Kraig Conrad's president and chief executive officer of the National Contract Management Association. At NCMA's World Congress, he says when the contracting pros that are at the event get home, he wants them to focus on better contracting outcomes.
We are doing many things that include workshopping, simulations, all of the things that get people to practice, train as they fight, so to speak. So our goal is that they go back and feel energized to have to do that or want to do that. We all know that the community, those that serve the mission, there's so many rules, regulations, particularly in contracting, that we want them to find that inspiration to work within the rule set, but also be energized to try new things and to go forward. And those new things, again, are exactly what we deliver here at World Congress through workshopping, simulations, new content, innovation speakers, and the like.
What are the new things that you think are driving the conversation here, Kraig?
So some of the new things, a lot of it's connected to the Better Contracting Initiative, where the goal is to get folks to come together and really think about the entire acquisition process early on. So those are the SAWs, the Surface Acquisition Workshops, and the civilian CSAWs. So that is the key innovations, if you will, which doesn't even sound like an innovation. It's just get people together in the beginning, and it's everybody. It's program, contracting, post-award, everybody in the process. So we're bringing that here with the vertical of contract management to explore, experience, and be prepared to go back to the office and say, hey, you need to have me at the front end of the process.
Three letters that I'm hearing, it's kind of a buzz on the floor here. ISO. Why should people care about that back in Washington and also here in Seattle?
Well, thank you for asking that. NCMA is an ANSI-accredited standards developing organization. That's exciting because we have an opportunity to establish what the practice looks like from a standards perspective. Our goal is to take that American national standard and with our partner, World Commerce and Contracting, become an ISO standard. So we want to make sure that that standard is accepted and adopted globally through ISO. The exciting thing is the standard is currently in its American form accepted by the federal government through the DOE and FACSI professional programs. So we think this is the next natural step so that our profession can be elevated globally.
What will that mean to the contracting community in the federal government, both on the government side and on the industry side that serves government?
Largely, it will mean that there is a core competency and a core practice globally. That may not sound like a tremendous thing, but when we look at contract management and procurement, even within the federal government, different agencies, different branches use different words. They have different processes. This will allow for standardization. It will allow for improvement of process. And at the same time, it will allow for our profession to be well known, more known globally, like the other professions, accounting, finance, and the like.
Will it also make it easier for agencies to provide a more clear career path, and for the federal government as a whole with the opportunity to move agency to agency? Because that's something that both acquisition people and human capital people have been telling me for a long time they would like to see.
It certainly will help. So as you know, with the DOE certification for contract management being accepted by FAI through the FACSI professional, that's step one. So now they're using the same standard in terms of how they're getting people prepared and certifying that they can do the job. The next natural step will be that it'd be clearer to see the pathway. That's another outcome of what we hope by going to ISO, is that you can see how you can enter the profession either at the federal level, state and local, commercial. You could be somewhere else in public procurement around the world, and see how you can progress in the job to, as you grow into commercial, out into government, etc.
All right, less than a minute left. I understand that we are going to another cool location next year for World Congress.
We are going to be down in Grapevine, Texas. But the exciting thing is that we're going to create two experiences for our attendees. The first will be at the traditional Gaylord, where all the sessions will be. But we realize that a lot of what happens here is networking. You build your network. So we're going to have a Las Colinas experience, which is going to be the fun, cool kid place, axe throwing and entertainment and bands and the like. So during the day, we come together in our sessions. Afterward, you pick the experience you want and go build that network.
You can read more about contracting in the federal government on today's show page at fedgovtoday.com. Up next generation acquisition for next gen tech. FedGov Today with Francis Rose continues in a moment. Here's Abhishek Agrawal, CEO of Material Security, with today's Cyber Insight.
One of the first things we're seeing is just a lot of focus on zero trust. Obviously, that's a term that's gaining a ton of popularity inside the federal sector. And I think it's great, and it's directly tied to the idea of resilience, because the whole point of zero trust, obviously, is that you're not susceptible to one failure at some point in the chain. You have additional layers that create resilience. So there's a ton of conversation around zero trust happening and being applied to lots of different specific areas within the cloud, especially in the face of things like some of the AI-based advancements now, both from a defensive standpoint and an offensive standpoint.
Welcome back. The General Services Administration's taking nominations now for the Acquisition Policy Federal Advisory Committee. Those nominations are open until the middle of this month. Jeff Koses is Senior Procurement Executive at GSA. At NCMA's World Congress, he explains the genesis of the advisory committee.
About 2 years ago, we stood up a first-generation federal advisory committee focused in acquisitions policy space. First generation was all about sustainable acquisition. We found it was really tremendously valuable. Got great input from so many people who want to be part of that. They gave us ideas, how do we help the workforce get ready for that? How do we help our industry partners understand that? And what are the key policy considerations we should be thinking in? That's now run about a 2-year period, and we figured, we got so much value out of this, let's keep going forward. Let's hit a second generation of the Acquisition Advisory Committee. This time we're focusing on issues in emerging tech, such as AI. Francis, what we're really looking to do is focus on questions, what are the right policy guardrails? What do we need to do in the acquisition community to enable that, to give it the space to grow, to set consistent operating practices? Just saw, for example, folks dealing with questions of software license terms. Right question to ask, but we don't want to answer that one time for one procurement. We want to help lay a consistent foundation across the picture. That's really what we're trying to do with this advisory committee.
What did you learn from the first generation of the advisory committee, structurally or logistically, that you applied to the second generation, Jeff?
First generation, we quickly divided into 3 subcommittees, focused on those 3 areas, workforce, industry, and policy and practice. One thing we learned, we had a lot of people anxious to sign up to be a part of this. Second thing we learned, it would be really easy to overwhelm them. We overscheduled them, gave them too many meetings, too many tasks. And in some ways, we didn't give them as clear a roadmap as we could have of where they could be most helpful. You always want to apply the lessons you learned. What worked well? How do you replicate it? And how do you take a step and make it better? So that's what we're trying to do with Generation 2.
With Generation 2, is there an end state or an end product or end result, or is it something that will continue to evolve because of the nature of the technology that you're covering or the demands from industry and your government customers or some other reason?
There's probably an in-between. If you set a consistent set of rules of the road, that really lets AI and emerging tech thrive in the acquisition landscape. But there's going to be continuous innovation. There's going to be capability that we had not imagined today that we're going to see a few years from now. So I wouldn't say it's an end state, but it's a roadmap that we're trying to create and that we can follow.
Another project you've been working on for a long time is expanding the use of data in the acquisition process. Where do you stand on that, and what are some of the developments happening around data?
Several years ago, and actually you and I talked about it at the time, we recognized we're living in a big data world. There's incredible potential if we can start harnessing acquisition data to get to better outcomes. We said there's a way to reduce costs for industry, reduce regulatory burden, enable new entrants, make it easier for companies who've never had to deal with government to come in. But to do that, we had to get away from using a regulatory-based system, use the free market, use the power of data. That's what led us to an initiative called transactional data reporting. It was a way to use data to try and really understand what was the market prices, and we applied that across a sub-portion of the federal supply schedules. About 3,400 contracts or so were able to to opt into that, and many of them found it hugely beneficial. So what do we do with that? First, we had to learn how do we clean up the data, what's involved in cleansing it, what's involved in standardizing it, how do we make it usable? That was a big effort. Not an easy effort, but it's yielded benefits that we had never imagined we would see. Did we get that reduced regulatory cost? We absolutely did. We expected that one. But then we started learning many of the other things we could do with the data. Small business success, for example. We have a BPA within our schedules, something called TUJITS. It's focused in IT software. And as we're starting to look and assess that data, said, hey, we're seeing the small businesses, they're not getting the share of the business we'd expect in this. The VARs, the value-added resellers of small businesses, they were not getting that business, and they should have. We only recognized that through the data. That made it actionable. As we took apart the data, we realized, hey, that's happening because they're not being offered the full product line from the OEMs that the large VARs are being offered. That was actionable. We worked with the OEMs. They expanded their approved reseller agreements to the small businesses, who now capture a majority of that spend. Third advantage we're starting to see coming out of that, cybersecurity information. We've had examples where CISA has recognized a new and emerging threat. We've been able to go into that data, reach out to the agencies who've bought those items and alert them, hey, you're buying something that CISA has now found to be a risk. That's a pretty cool use of data. I didn't picture that was one of the benefits when we started this initiative, but it's a huge advantage. And fourth, by sharing demand data, we're making it easier for our vendors, for our business partners to use the data to recognize where's demand growing, where's it receding. One of my roles in GSA is our representative to the Ability One Commission. You're familiar with Ability One, yeah. Francis, the agency that helps the blind, the severely disabled get new opportunities for business through government contracts. Well, we've started sharing that data initially with them. We've recognized, hey, they are carrying all kinds of costs for items we don't buy. They are underproducing items where we have a growing demand. So sharing demand data, it let them start right-sizing their offerings. And we're now making that data available much more broadly. So that's some really cool and concrete benefits coming out of it. It was a long process to mature the data, to cleanse it, to make it actionable. But we've just announced an expansion. About another 1,900 contractors will be able to opt in. They're all very much producing what we call non-configurable products, standard items. That's where the data is the maturest, the cleanest. Mm-hmm. So that's our next step in transactional data. And then that, over time, lets us keep working on the data on the configurable products and on services.
What are you doing to support the workforce that's doing all of this work? I know that's something you're very passionate about, Jeff.
I'm going to go right back to data. I know that's going to shock you.
Right.
One of the things that we did over the last couple of years, we moved to a new learning management system. And in doing that, we were able to pull a lot more demographic data on the workforce and what was going on. One of the things we learned across the civilian agencies, not DoD, they have a very different profile. Across the civilian agencies, we had more than four times as many members of our 1102, our contracting folks, over age 60 as under age 30. Mm. That is obviously not a healthy ratio. That does not position you for future success. We had components where it was more extreme. We had more over 70 than under age 25. We used that to really build a consensus. We need a new talent development program, one that we've stood up over the last year across GSA. We're trying to build a common curriculum, one way of doing business, a common training, so that we are reaching out to the colleges, to the universities, large, small, HBCU, really bring in entry-level talent, give them professional opportunities, give them common learning program. We brought in a first cohort in February of 30. Second cohort started in July, an additional 80, and we're now working on a third cohort to bring in early next year. We think it's efforts like that where we leverage the data to understand our workforce, look at where do we create the opportunities, where do we build opportunities for them, and try and move that forward. So that's what we're doing.
You can read more about the work Jeff and his team are doing at GSA on today's show page at fedgovtoday.com. FedGov Today continues in a moment. Here's Steve Jasna of Carahsoft on innovation in government from TechNet Cyber, presented by Carahsoft.
I also see the evolution sort of ransomware and malware that's sort of being sort of jump-started by AI, right? And these AI attacks are becoming harder to sort of manage, especially around phishing. Some of these things look very, very real. So I think AI is going to be a theme sort of across all the verticals within cybersecurity.
For more, go to innovationingov.com. Welcome back. In today's event spotlight, I hope you'll join me at Nats Park Thursday, October 3rd, to learn about the intersection of the cloud, data, and AI. Cloudera presents Accelerate AI with Trusted Data from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. that day. You'll learn how to maximize a hybrid cloud environment for AI and data success. You can read more about the event and register at fedgovtoday.com/events. FedGov Today TV returns next Sunday morning at 10:30. Teresa Hunter, the Chief Financial Officer at the IRS, is here. And Scott Simpson, the Digital Transformation Lead at DHS, will join me. I'm Francis Rose. I'll see you then. Thanks for watching. Have a great week. If you want insights from agency and industry leaders on the latest topics in technology, management, workforce, defense, and acquisition, sign up for the FedGov Today podcast with me, Francis Rose. I release new episodes every Tuesday and Thursday, so you'll stay up to date on the issues that matter most to federal government leaders. Listen at fedgovtoday.com and everywhere you get your shows. Don't miss out on the conversation. Follow the podcast today.